Welcome back, DIVEBOMB IndyCar podcast for another bonus episode reviewing IndyCar Content Day number 2. This episode is going out on Friday morning, so another bonus episode for you, just reviewing the second day of exclusive IndyCar driver content and quotes, and just all the information we've gathered throughout the day. A bit more of an insightful day in some aspects, I feel, in regards to particular drivers. Obviously, a lot there have been 14 drivers today, just today. I think some less high-profile names, but still loads to look into from today, which is really, really interesting. So, should we begin where we started yesterday, right at the start of the day?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I think we had some of our, just as a general note, some of the most insightful stuff, as you said. I think particularly Pato O'Ward, Kyle Kirkwood, and Rinus VeeKay to kind of round it all off. They were all particularly good. But yeah, I think as a general note, all very good. And it starts with Rinus VeeKay, who was the first to come in with a Starbucks.
Yep, came in on time as well. We were worried he might be late, but
yeah, he came in with a Starbucks, but we kind of forgot to count from VeeKay.
I don't think there were many other Starbucks throughout the day.
No, I feel like Robb maybe had one, but
yeah, maybe we'll have to have a look at the playback video, see who brought in their Starbucks. But I don't think many did.
No, it was a new suit for VeeKay.
Yes, I was about to get on to that.
Kind of in keeping, isn't it, with Ed Carpenter Racing seeming to move a little bit away from BitNile. BitNile isn't the marquee sponsor of any of their drivers. I don't know what was Rasmussen's. Can you remember?
GuyCare.
Was it GuyCare as well? I can't remember.
It was GuyCare.
If I noted that down, yeah, no.
What colour was VeeKay? Was he green and white?
VeeKay was a bit green because I think we made. He was asked about Canapino, I think, in one of the answers.
He was,
and I remember remarking about, he looks like he could be driving with Canapino. So it was Risk on International. Was it Risk on International? Was that the international thing? It was someone with something international.
VeeKay. It was to do with racing in Argentina because he put it on Twitter a few months ago or something.
Yeah, sorry. The question was, but in terms of the sponsor, what was the sponsor?
The sponsor.
Yeah, it was Risk on International, I think.
It was something. It might say. Let's have a look.
I can't remember what it. Someone with something international. The new sponsors have all kind of just merged into one. It was BitNile small in the corner again, which kind of seems to be the theme, taking a back step.
Yeah, let's look at VeeKay's Instagram. Risk on International, yeah, that's the one. It was kind of a green and black suit. It was very Hunkoff last year vibes.
Yeah. So surprised I remembered that from nearly 9 hours ago.
Yeah, we're still going.
still going, but
earlier finish today though. To be fair, so
yeah, it was. To be fair, we're here at 10:30 rather than 11. So that's something. But yeah, let's just maybe crack on with what VeeKay was saying. Got my trusty notepad here again with all the notes from throughout the day. But VeeKay, he said what we all know really. 2023 was tough. He ended it well, but I think he says 2024 will be good. I don't know whether drivers would really come in saying, well, I'm not very confident for this year. So you kind of just got to take it with a pinch of salt. But I think generally all the drivers have been quite positive, like coming into the room, I feel.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And VeeKay sort of overarching question was what's your role going to be if Christian Rasmussen coming in? He was guided by Ryan Hunter-Reay, and now it's Rinus' responsibility to sort of guide someone else in Christian Rasmussen in his early IndyCar days.
Yeah, I was going to say that. The thing that really stuck out for me that I've got noted down here is that VeeKay was speaking as though he was going to be a leader. He was very keen to step up and kind of take the lead with a rookie teammate alongside him. It's his 5th year in IndyCar, so he's quite experienced now. Obviously not the most experienced. There's a lot more seasoned drivers. However, he now feels he's at a stage where he knows what he needs from the car. He said that in terms of Ryan Hunter-Reay, he kind of made him see how to prepare, how to analyze a little bit better, and he now feels he can kind of carry that over. I don't know whether there was a direct correlation between Hunter-Reay being there and VeeKay ending last season strongly, but he certainly feels like heading into the season, what he has learned from Hunter-Reay will be quite valuable.
Yeah, and it will be a telling year for VeeKay because last year was maybe a bit frustrating from his end. I think he did kind of mention that it didn't go perfectly, and he's now at that stage of his career where is the progression for VeeKay? He obviously said he's looking for the podiums and wins again. That's not really fully his fault that they haven't come his way. But I think for him, he's going to be looking up at maybe a bigger move in 2025, and he's going to have to really step up his game slightly more if he wants to do that. Obviously, he's going to be influential with Christian Rasmussen as well, which will only help him in future years. But it's going to be a 10 a year if he wants to get that big money move.
Yeah, possibly. And we got off to a good start in terms of our question asking for the day. Got one in first time of asking, 8 a.m. local. Thankfully, it's early afternoon for us, so not quite as tired as they may be. But yeah, I just asked about maybe what would be a success for the season for VeeKay, and he just said, as you've kind of said there, Dan, getting back on the podium, nibbling on the edge of top 10 in the championship. He thinks, well, I don't know whether it's realistic or not, but that would be, in his eyes, what is a success. And really, he kind of said, in terms of improvements to make, he just wants to operate more in the window. He wants to not miss out on details that he may have missed out on before, which kind of links back to what he was saying about Hunter Ray and the improvements there. But yeah, it's all, as we've said, the general theme about kind of becoming a bigger voice and kind of listening to the team, but not only listening now, also kind of building on and feeling he has the power now to make some changes as well. And he's very aware of that role. And I think the only other stuff he kind of touched on was with the Indy 500, which is obviously his strong suit. He's kind of been right at the front in qualifying in the races over recent years. He said the target there, though, is to just stay out of trouble. And he said it's time to be on pole because he feels there has been an upward trajectory through the top places in qualifying. So while this was quite interesting, actually, his description was that the Rahal cars looked not in control, scary to drive, whereas he said he just didn't have to worry about his car. He didn't have to worry about losing grip, and it just felt like it could be efficient.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why they've been so strong there in recent years. Obviously, the pit lane incident kind of derailed his day a bit last year, but he's certainly got the potential to run at the front and to be a contender for next year's Indy 500. Well, this year now we've moved on, haven't we?
This year, yeah. I mean, I predicted him. Well, I didn't predict him explicitly, but I said the Ed Carpenter racing cars will always be strong. So, never know. Maybe one year he will upset the odds. Yeah.
Talking of Indy 500 successes, let's move straight on to Marcus Ericsson.
These seamless transitions.
We're going to try and get them today. Marcus Ericsson, new colours for him. There's a very black race suit on this occasion. He's dropped Husky Chocolate. He did confirm that, or Husky Ice Spritz. They changed it, didn't they, halfway through? He says he's dropped them as a sponsor. He's going for Delaware Life, which is some sort of, it's linked to Gamebridge somehow. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but it's linked to Gamebridge somehow. So he's got a very black race suit this year. And he seems optimistic for Andretti. His one was a bit busier than we thought it would be with Ericsson, to be honest. But again, he seems pretty confident he's going to be in the leadership role at Andretti this year. He's got a similar amount of experience in the series to Herta, who's obviously quite a lot older, but he feels he's going to be playing that role in Andretti this year.
Yeah, I found that really interesting. I mean, I'll just touch on the race suit initially. Delaware Life was kind of one of Grosjean's many chopping and changing sponsors when he wasn't with DHL, so maybe we'll see Ericsson in a few different colours through the season. But yeah, that was kind of stuck out to me as well, that he felt like he was going to be the team leader despite Herta having been in IndyCar across a longer period than Ericsson has been, which suggests that, Ericsson maybe he's more experienced in motorsport, and Herta and Kirkwood, of course, a lot younger than him. So he clearly feels like he can use that wisdom and kind of put that over his teammates. However, I kind of feel like at Andretti, it's one of those where there won't be like a particular leader. It will be quite a collaborative effort. Yeah,
and that's kind of been the case in recent years, I think, in particular as well. And I think Andretti, I think we'll get onto Kyle and Colton a bit later on, but it's looking bright for them this year. They all seem pretty confident. I think they all kind of said 2023 wasn't quite where they needed to be as a team, but I think all three of them were asked about downsizing. All of them were pretty happy with the move to downsize, and they think it's going to play into the team's benefit. I don't think they seem as confident as the Ganassis and the Penskes do, but they seem confident that this year could be better.
Yeah, I think Ericsson said that he's not one to set targets particularly, so not very helpful on that front, trying to suss out where they could be. But yeah, I think the way that he puts it is he feels he could be in a more senior position in the team, going back to kind of the whole leadership thing. But yeah, as you said, there was the whole talk about slimming down. A lot of talk actually about continuity with all the drivers having multi-year deals, which is not insignificant. They can kind of build not only this year, but if they try and stick to 3 cars, or if it goes really well with 3 cars, then they can always try and expand again. But they all seem pretty happy with the decision, and Ericsson described his 2 younger teammates as really good guys. So, yeah, I think the dynamic there, it looks pretty good.
Yeah, and one of Ericsson's interesting comments, I will just find it here, was, would you make any rule changes to the 500? And I think kind of funny comment he says was, yes, from second of a lap to go, I hope there's a red flag again.
Yeah, I mean, that was amusing. He also mentioned the Dragon as well, which was something he used to win the 500, but he still thinks that is something they could cut down on, although it's just hard to police.
I think the main issue was well, I don't want to point out Newgarden in particular, but it was sort of the crossing of the attenuator. Even Newgarden himself, to be fair, said it is a step over the line, but because he knew it was allowed, he was gonna use it. But I think that's something they need to keep an eye on, because if you do crash into the attenuator, that's going to be a hefty accident. So it's something probably worth looking at. I think who was it yesterday who said about calling the restarts early? Was it Pelé?
It was Castro Neves.
Castro Neves, sorry, yeah. So a couple changes there, which I think all round people are pretty keen on both those things happening. So whether that will be a factor will be interesting. But I think it's something that definitely probably does need reviewing between now and the month of May.
Yeah, and talking about kind of more changes to IndyCar as well, Ericsson was another that was apparently in attendance at the Penske Entertainment Corporation dinner, which he described as interesting. And it was kind of similar takeaways to, well, it was Ray Robb that kind of spoke most elaborately about it yesterday. And Ericsson, again, he was similarly kind of upbeat about the fact that we might hear some positive things in the coming months. He said there's lots of good stuff to come. I think I'm paraphrasing there, but something along those lines. But yeah, he acknowledges maybe the off-season has not been the smoothest, but he says that there is lots to be happy about, which I think is encouraging for us.
Yeah, so good changes coming into hopefully the next couple of seasons. No change at AJ Foyt. Santino Ferrucci obviously confirmed for another season with the team. Wasn't really too much to talk to Santino about. It was obviously a bit of continuity from last year. He's getting married.
He's a funny character, is Santino. He came in, picked the mic up off the stand and said, I'm going to stand up, which was not well received because they would have to have changed the camera. So he sat down. I think he's embarrassed about being small. So that was something interesting to take away. He's growing a mullet, as you mentioned. He's getting married. He said that is his wedding cut, which is
weddings
an interesting choice.
Been a huge talk of the content days. We had VeeKay in the morning, which we didn't mention. Then we had a couple yesterday. Rosenquist was one later in the day.
Canapino
was. There was someone else yesterday, I think. I can't remember who it was.
Rossi was married in the off-season.
Rossi was married. There might be someone else. There's so many getting married. So the off-season seems to be
like a quarter of the grid, it feels.
But yeah, Ferrucci's grown a proper mullet now in his goal to.
And just stay tuned for later in the podcast as well, where Stingray Robb says something about that. So we'll get onto that in a bit. But yeah, it was the first time we've heard Ferrucci speak since he had been renewed. I think he said that he's got a really good relationship with the team president, Larry Foyt, which is one big reason why they've been able to iron stuff out, continue. I think he mentioned that it was always his goal to return to gain that continuity that he hasn't always had in his career. The biggest hurdle was sponsorship for him. He admitted that. He'd been working on it for a while. Lots of ideas of how to make it work, and ultimately they did make it work.
Yeah, I think biggest takeaway from Ferrucci was the fact he has confirmed he's doing a full season. There were grumblings in the off-season at points that he would be doing a partial schedule on the ovals, but he says the intention is to do a full schedule. He says sponsorship is obviously a problem, and we have been kind of made aware of that throughout the off-season, but Ferrucci has confirmed he will be doing the full season.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to note that he said the intention, because I believe that was also used in the press release. I think Nathan Brown noted this. So it's by no means a word that suggests certainty, but I think the intention definitely shows. I mean, he was definitely keen to kind of, just go the same as they went last year and repeat, and hopefully in a second year with the team do even better. I think with the Penske Alliance, which he, like Rob was in his teleconference after being confirmed with the team, he similarly thought it was going to be really, really valuable. And Ferrucci hopes that they will have 5 untouchable cars for the 500, which is obviously bold, but he believes that it will be kind of that effective, this Penske Alliance.
And obviously, Ferrucci's press conference mainly based around the Indy 500. He's targeted that as one of his goals for this year. I think he said one of his expectations is for it's Indy 500. That's how they're going to assess performance, which is particularly interesting. So that was obviously one of the main talking points for him. Whether he can replicate his heroics from this year is going to be particularly interesting. But he seems confident that can happen again.
And one of the amusing notes that Ferrucci gave was that he was sure, as according to IndyCar memes, he said that Joseph Newgarden, who is not all that fond of Ferrucci, it seems, would love to have him in the debriefs, but I think it does seem that they maybe will be a bit separate sort of on race weekends, but the alliance will probably work in other ways. But yeah, from Ferrucci, other bits that I've noted down, he spoke of Stingray's name being so freaking cool. A bit like, I think Larry said this previously last month, that he'd kind of spotted Stingray in the ladder system just because of his name. Ferrucci said similar. Doesn't know what sort of feedback that Rob will give because he's not worked with him before, but I think they'll probably get on well. They seem like two characters for sure.
Yes.
And the only other thing was, I don't know whether we knew this or not, but Ferrucci mentioned the repave at Iowa, and Foyt last year were really strong on the repaves on the road courses. So
yeah, I mean, we know mid-Ohio's get repaved. I don't think we knew about Iowa before. At least I didn't know about Iowa. But we'll see. We'll see. I think we said in the podcast episode we're expecting a fast 6 appearance from them at not Iowa, Mid-Ohio. There we are, Mid-Ohio. So we'll see what happens there. So only 6 months to wait to Mid-Ohio.
Yep, only 6 months or so. Same day as Silverstone.
Yeah, talking of waiting, Pato O'Ward, we had to wait a while for him. He was 10 minutes late to his press conference.
Somehow they recovered it. It's really afternoon. Managed to recover it quite well, but talked.
But to be fair, we had it's a bit of a weird one. So you normally have about 20-40 minute break every 2 to 3 drivers. I think we had Ferrucci, O'Ward, Rasmussen, Lundgaard, and Armstrong in a race. So it was a very long couple of hours, but we got there. But yeah, O'Ward, talking of long, had some very long answers, but he was great. Gave some really in-depth answers. I think he was only asked about 3 or 4 questions for the entire press conference, but I think the 2 biggest ones were, all of them are pretty big. I think we'll touch on what he mentioned first, which was just how he was dialing out of the off season. He kind of said that his season didn't really end until December 6th because he had the IndyCar season, then he had the hybrid testing, and had all his F1 stuff going on. They said December 6th was the first day off, which is crazy. And he said he just completely switches off. He doesn't want anyone to talk to him for 2 weeks, and he just relaxes and spends time with family and friends, which is what he said he wants to do. And it's quite interesting, that sort of side of Pato, him taking himself away from the equation and putting himself out of it completely. But it's just testament to, even though the off season is so long, Newgarden spoke about this. You're always working. There's always something to be doing.
Yeah, I think he said he now does feel good physically, he feels good mentally. So clearly the kind of reset has helped him. I think looking, before we get onto the stuff he spoke about quite elaborately in terms of the state of IndyCar, he was just noting that the real thing that he picked out as maybe a place to learn, with obviously going winless last season, was just how costly risks can be, and kind of just balancing. I think he said it was sort of a battle with himself over finding a balance between taking advantage of opportunities and taking unnecessary risks. I think obviously he's referencing races like Long Beach. I think he still isn't taking blame for the Indy 500. He wasn't keen to take blame for that. I think during last season he spoke about that a lot. But there was also Detroit, wasn't there?
Right. Yeah, and that's something particularly noticeable, because we spoke about this a lot during the podcast. Is O'Ward going to stop these sort of desperation maneuvers? And he did towards the end of the season. His form, he was very consistent towards the end of the season. I think that was a huge factor towards it. And that whole segment from O'Ward was particularly interesting about sort of calculating it, thinking longer term. There was a 17-race season, and he threw away 30 points at Long Beach, trying to gain an extra 2. Is kind of what his point was. And I think Long Beach was the one he was referring to primarily, but as you said, Detroit was one. Again, that wasn't admittedly all his fault. And obviously he had the pit stop error, but Detroit was one. And even like Mid-Ohio, where he made that mistake in qualifying and spun into the grass in the first session. But that seems to be a huge takeaway for him which is going to be particularly interesting because that's something sort of Pato's struggled with before, maybe a slight hint of desperation, but now he's sort of taken that step back. It's going to be particularly interesting. I think another one which was sort of the same point he was on was, yes, it was a win in the season, but he had 7 podiums. That was 3 more than any other season he's got before, and he still thinks he had a really, really good season, even though there were no wins, which, to be honest, I completely agree with him.
Yeah, he said there were a lot of little wins. I think they were his words. So clearly he's encouraged by the season that they had despite the lack of wins. Yes, as you said, he was on the podium a lot of times. It was arguably his strongest season in IndyCar, but it is just, I think he's clearly frustrated with himself about that sort of not even mid-season patch, because obviously Long Beach was quite early. Then you had the 500 Detroit, but I think it was kind of once he got past the halfway point, he did refine his approach. I think there's a clip from 100 Days to Indy where he spoke about the approach, and he's clearly very mature. He clearly knows how he's going to just improve on himself. And I think what he said, he just needs to pick wisely in those sort of situations and kind of weigh up risk and reward.
Yeah, looking at Detroit and the 10 races afterwards, finished in the top 10 in all of them. He got 4 podiums in that. So obviously it did make a difference. And that's sort of what Palou did so well across the season. You know, the races where he wasn't at the very front, he still got those points. And it's sort of those 7th, 8th places where if you get them all over a season, they're eventually going to be significant. So very interesting standpoint from Pato on that aspect. So just as a general thing, he thinks, you know, there was progress made last season, although on paper it doesn't look like it. He really does believe it. I think maybe his longest answer was asked basically, why are you so vocal? A lot of drivers see this series as really good as it is. It doesn't need much changing, but Pato has always been very vocal about how he wants to change the series, which is something particularly interesting. And you know, he was asked, why do you speak out about it? And I think I can't remember the exact quote there it is, but when you don't evolve and when you don't change, you sure as hell will not grow. The only way to doing that is to change things up, which is particularly interesting from Pato. He's always been vocal about it. I think the chassis was the most recently, and it's really interesting. He sort of said 30 years ago, the way that change is done is completely different to the way change is done now, and he went really in depth with it. And you know, he's happy to talk about the series in depth, and he wasn't at this meeting. I think there's been mumblings that there's going to be more sort of along these lines, but he's open to recommend his suggestions into improving the series.
Yeah, I almost wish more drivers spoke out like he did, so elaborately and so eloquently. It's a bit like Callum Ilott, the conversation we had with him. He spoke for a long time about kind of the state of the series, and it's clear all of the drivers who have been in the series for a couple of years or more have a vision for the series of how it can grow. And O'Ward believes that they've not quite cracked the formula yet. He knows that growth is possible, but yeah, he's so passionate. I think that's the thing that really struck me. I mean, another thing he mentioned was about racing in Mexico, possibly. He said that's high on his priority list. He actually thinks it will happen one day. He doesn't think it will be at Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez, which is where the F1 race is obviously hosted, Formula E as well. So I think him saying that he doesn't think it will happen there suggests that conversations must have been held about something where it may happen.
But he mentioned the likes of Uruguay and Argentina in there quite significantly as well, which is, I mean, I don't know where it happened in Mexico. Puebla is an option that's got the sort of the oval track. Who wanted to go down that route. But he's vocal about racing in Latin America, and I think maybe the thing that I grabbed the most from Pato's entire interview was, I think one of the biggest things that we all have to focus on is the excuse is always, well, the partners don't care about going international. Well, why? Like, we need to be able to offer a product that makes international brands want to be part of it, and I think that's very telling from Pato. And what I love about sort of this entire segment, he's just so honest. You know, he will say what he thinks, which is great for the series. We need figures like that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that struck me, staying kind of on the theme of the international race and the partners, was that he said he heard the series don't like the idea of an international race, which kind of contrasts what we've kind of heard from Mark Miles about, you know, them trying to work on an Argentinian race and all parties wanting that to happen. And could be an indication as to why maybe we've not heard anything about an Argentina race now. I know Canapino said that he wanted that to happen, but it remains to be seen because kind of time is now ticking. We're getting into the season almost, and this would be an off-season thing. So it would have to be announced soon and sorted soon, I feel, if that was to happen this year. But yeah, O'Ward said that he feels there are big markets and passionate markets that IndyCar need to explore better, and a race internationally in Latin America could kind of fill that quota in his eyes.
Yeah, and one of the points he said was, I think international races is something that they need to look at more, not to standards of Formula One. They need to stick to their roots. But I think I agree with him. Although it's logistically a bit of a nightmare, it gives you a bigger fan base. It gives you more diversity. Look what Canapino's done, just being an Argentine driver. What's an Argentine race going to do for the sport in Argentina? So definitely something to consider. As we said, we haven't really heard too much from it recently. As we said, we asked Canapino about it yesterday, and he really wanted it to happen. He was vocal about it. So see what happens a bit. But I think Pato, out of everyone today, was probably the most insightful and the most honest.
Yeah, I completely agree, I think.
Let's move on to the other end of the spectrum. With all respect to Christian Rasmussen coming in his rookie season, racing alongside Ed Carpenter. I think one of the most interesting things was right at the start, where he was speaking about the funding that he's received. He's obviously won every step of the ladder, which has helped him increase significantly. I think he said here, 3 times during the year we were less than 24 hours from losing my ride. Crazy. And now the guy finds himself in IndyCar, which is great to see.
Oh, it's a great story, and obviously at DIVEBOMB as well, having sponsored him when he was in Indy Lights, that was, there's kind of a personal touch to that. He said it had kind of been, it's hard to say where he will end up this year. And I think that was relating to kind of just like performance wise and results wise. It's slightly difficult to know what to expect, but yeah, I think the most significant thing he mentioned was kind of just the financial burden being off his shoulders. And Rinus VeeKay said something similar later, but it just shows how much pressure there is in the road to Indy, in these feeder series, kind of leading up to the top series. There's a lot of pressure on drivers to, kind of keep their own careers going. One little thing could derail absolutely everything.
Yeah, and with Rasmussen, it's going to be an interesting year. I feel like people still see him as a fairly unknown figure. Whilst Kirkwood stepped up, he was creme de la creme. He was the guy. But I feel Rasmussen's fairly unknown in that regard, maybe because of all the sponsorship issues he's had. But when we asked him about what he thinks his future lies, he seemed pretty confident he's going to be in IndyCar for a few years.
Yeah, I mean, I asked him about. Well, it was kind of. I think he answered my second question in my first question, to be honest. But I just asked him about whether, not racing on ovals this year could actually aid his development by allowing him to focus on just road and street courses, and then have kind of ovals come at a later date. And it does seem like the intention is to run a full program in 2025, and he plans to travel to other ovals. I think he said in another answer he's really keen to learn, but yeah, he's very aware of the challenge of IndyCar, and he's coming into a team as well that didn't perform particularly well last year. He's open to learning as much as he can, really, whether that is when he's racing on the road and street courses, when he's simply there in attendance on the ovals. Obviously, he's running the Indy 500 as well. He said, it would always be the goal to run the full season, but there are still kind of some perks to not running the entire season.
Yeah, and bit of another year for Rasmussen. We'll see what comes out of it. I think if he is going full time 2025, so what happens to Ed? That's a big question. Is the expectation Rinus stays? So that's going to be an interesting dynamic to follow throughout the year for me. But best of luck to Christian. Nice to see a DIVEBOMB driver getting in the big leagues nowadays.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely wishing him the best, and it would be good to see him, get some headline results, and it'll be good to see him kind of over the years hopefully succeed.
Yeah. So from one Christian to another, Christian Lundgaard followed us next, and I didn't really get too much out of Christian. Obviously, it was kind of the slump where we had about 4 or 5 drivers to race. I think everyone was a bit tired, but he seems confident. He was happy with how the team performed last season. Obviously, he sort of said the expectation was them to be fighting for podiums, and he expects to do that a bit more this year. And obviously, ovals, he mentioned, they weren't good enough. Obviously, we'll touch on that a bit more in a second. But he was fairly neutral towards his views of the season. He didn't really give too much to us.
Yeah, no, to be honest, I think ovals was kind of the key thing, really. There wasn't much else aside from that, to be honest. I think he was mentioning some personnel changes that have led to the improvements that they've made. And, he feels like if they show up to road courses with the same car, they really can compete for wins. However, their focus this off-season has been on improving their oval package and their oval form. They've put a lot of time into trying to improve there because as a team, they know that last season wasn't good enough. Having 3 of their 4 cars and all 3 of their full-time cars in contending on bump day was not what they wanted. And then obviously having Graham bumped from the 500, yes, came back, of course, after Stephen Wilson's injury. But I think as a team, they are really working hard together to sort it out on ovals. I mean, I asked Christian, I think, about specific improvements that maybe they have to make, and he really just said it comes down to having a fast car. And this I know it sounds slightly, not giving much away, but it does seem as simple as that on ovals, really, that if the car is not in the window, you're going to struggle. And that it kind of links back to what VeeKay said earlier, kind of just about, the Rahal cars, they just weren't good. And I'll just look back to what he said exactly. Yeah, he said the Rahal cars didn't look in control, which kind of adds up to Christian's concerns about them. Whereas VeeKay just didn't have to worry. But I think that's what obviously RLO will kind of be striving towards. Yep. Lundgaard quite notably said he questioned himself. It's kind of a combination of stuff he feels, but his measure is his teammates, and he feels he has been on par with Graham, who is an accomplished oval driver, of course, which is, I think he said, kind of allowed him to calm himself down a little bit about the situation there. But yeah, in terms of what they are looking more positively at, you can't really gauge whether they're confident or not they've turned things around on ovals. I think until we get to the 500, probably won't know. But their road and street package is very good, he continues to say, and it's just now about converting those podium opportunities that maybe they didn't do enough of last season.
Yeah. Interesting to see how that fares out for Christian. Let's move on to his XF2 teammate, Marcus Armstrong. Obviously stepping up to a full-time ride this season, which he's pretty confident with. He's got a lot of learning to do, but I think we had obviously the 3 Ganassi youngsters in there today, and all of them was going to be learning from Scott, going to be learning from Dario, going to be learning from Alex Palou. So he seems pretty confident about what he could do. He's obviously looking forward to the 500 as well alongside that. And yeah, Armstrong's pretty confident about his chances this year.
He's in an interesting situation where, on one hand, he now knows all of the road and street courses, which will really benefit him. And I think he said this there, and I think he's said it before, that, coming back to tracks, it will be a real benefit because he's not having to learn the tracks. He knows them. I think that was shown the second Indy road course race. He had his best qualifying. I think he might have qualified the best of the Ganassis. Unfortunately, he had the incident early in the race, which wasn't his fault. But I think that's encouraging for him in terms of returning to tracks, knowing that he can kind of just settle down immediately rather than having to learn the tracks on the go. But yeah, it's just ovals, really, a different beast. You think he described them as, and it's something he's been eager to do for years. But it's a challenge, and he said he's been watching a lot of footage. He's thankful that there is experience in the team. Obviously, he has Dario there, he has Scott, he has Alex as he's got some very, either experienced heads that are still driving, or obviously Dario in kind of the advisory role. But he's a guy that is clearly open to asking questions. He wants to learn. And it's something that came up a lot. I'm not sure if Armstrong said it specifically, but the drivers often say they like to be sponges and kind of just... They're all very willing to learn.
It took Rasmussen a while to work out what the sponge was. I think Lundgaard was the other one we got at the end of the day. But yeah, sponges is a weird.
Yeah, no, definitely. But Armstrong is aware that he's got to be confident, he's got to be bold, he's got to be brave, he's got to go out and experiment things when it comes to, getting out there on the oval at Indianapolis, and then obviously the shorter ovals later in the season. So yeah, he has a lot of expertise to draw on, a lot of data to draw on, but it's going to be a weird one for him because he's an oval rookie, but at the same time he's a sophomore and now has more experience on the road and street courses.
I think this was something that was quite interesting when he mentioned is like, how's your role going to change with Kiffin and Linus in there? You're not sort of the youngest one anymore. You're got that bit of experience, and he doesn't think his role is going to change. He thinks it's sort of in the middle phase where Scott and Alex are, the best of the best. They're going to be the ones to learn from. But then you've got Kiffin and Linus on the other side who need to learn from this, and his Armstrong sort of in the middle where he doesn't really fit in a role in particular. But he seemed fairly individual minded going into this year. I don't really know what expectations are for Armstrong. He didn't really say he's got any specific goals. He doesn't really want to mention that. So we've got a lot to look forward to for Armstrong this year. He's obviously looking forward to Indy 500. He also said Macau is somewhere he'd love to see IndyCar go. Obviously, it's not particularly feasible, but he obviously raced there in the off season and wishes to go back. So a couple of interesting nuggets from Marcus Armstrong in his interview. So
yeah, I think one thing he thinks, it will actually benefit him, this being a bit of a busier year for him, kind of having more continuity going weekend to weekend rather than having a few races and then having to sit out on an oval. A few changes. Taylor Kyle, I think he was on the 8 car with Marcus Ericsson, is now a strategist. And then quite significantly, actually, Angela Ashmore is his lead engineer. I think only the 3rd lead female engineer in IndyCar history, I think it was said. So that's really significant. That's great to hear, really. But yeah, I think as you mentioned in terms of goals, I think he was another that said he's not really one to pick out specific things, that he kind of is setting as targets.
Yeah. Then it was the lunch break after 5 drivers in a row. Very, very long period of time. Our lunch break's a bit awkward because it's 4 o'clock for us. So it's not really lunch or dinner time. It's snack time for us.
Yeah, it was quite difficult to get to grips with the schedule. We've almost had to go on to US time for the last day or so.
Yeah, bit of a weird one. But got to mention races, didn't we? Rasmussen was sporting the blue and black guy care, but it's quite similar to Carpenter's, I think, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, what else do we have? Lundgaard O'Ward, yeah.
O'Ward had the McLaren, whatever it is now, the sun radiating from it.
Didn't look quite as bright today. I think
maybe they've turned the cameras down.
They changed the lighting or something.
Good idea.
Because of the McLaren suit, probably.
Yeah, quite probably. But Colton's was different.
Yes, yeah. I was just going to mention Armstrong's. I think he was still Ridgeline. Yeah, Colton's was different. It looks like there was some model car was someone found on Twitter and shared on Twitter. So it looks a bit more like the classic livery ran at the end of last season. I'm going to be honest, I can't particularly remember his race suit. I'll just get it up.
It was quite black, I think. It was more black than it was last year, with sort of yellow Gamebridge features.
Yeah, it was more black. I don't know if this will focus or not. Is that focusing at all?
No, not for me.
Not at all. No. Yeah, I'm not. The camera's not quite that good. Yeah, actually, the Andretti suits were a little bit different. Actually, they had like blocks of sponsors and then the name and the driver number. I don't know how to describe it particularly. You'll have to all find some photos of them. But yeah, Colton coming into his 7th year, not 7th full-time year, but it's the same as O'Ward, who
O'Ward couldn't quite believe it.
O'Ward was a little bit startled to hear it, to be honest. But yeah, just in terms of touching up on the similar things, again, he was excited for the whole downsizing. He feels like they've got a lot of good people on the team, and it's been a bit of a full plate for the personnel, I think he described it as, and now he feels like they can keep the same personnel but just focus it a bit more, which also means maybe more time preparing for the 500 as well. And yeah, they can just kind of, there's more in-depth. I don't know whether it was him that said there was more, you can kind of look at more in-depth data on each car rather than having more data. It's kind of quality over quantity.
Yeah, and I think Colton was quite an interesting one to learn from, because he was very open about misfortunes of last season. When you asked him, I think I was trying to find the exact quote, obviously.
I asked him about kind of just what the shortcomings were, didn't I? I think he said that it was
I think it was a
yeah.
season of what could have gone wrong did. It was kind of all over the place. It was for sure my worst season in IndyCar with no wins. It was the first time in my career that I haven't had a win in a year.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of says it all, doesn't it, really? I don't think he was particularly happy with... I mean, he was on the podium once, wasn't he? Which is very, very un-Colton, because throughout this young career still, he's obviously kind of always been up there challenging. So it was a different year, and it will obviously be interesting to kind of see how he rebounds from that. But one thing I found interesting, he kept referencing the word tempo. I think he finds it quite important that he really starts the season kind of with the right intent and starts off on, you know, quite a quick note and hits the ground running. I think he said that then he needs to keep up that tempo to essentially gain the consistency that Andretti have really struggled to have, and maybe streamlining and having 3 cars can allow them to gain more consistency across kind of as a team, because we spoke a lot about it during the season, but as a team, they never really put entire weekends together on all fronts. Even just their 3 main cars never kind of had a good weekend at the same time. So, yeah, I think in terms of things he wants to focus on short ovals. He wants to keep up the road and street course level in terms of maybe the potential they have, obviously wanting to put everything together a little bit more. I think other than that, he mentioned F1, described it as a kind of time-sensitive opportunity, said on the Andretti side there's not really much to report, and it kind of all depends when, if he is kind of to be one of the drivers that steps up there. You know, if it goes on too long, he may be out of that preferable age window for an F1 driver, and for now his main focus is still IndyCar.
Absolutely, and Colton's looking, I think, a bit more positive towards this season than he did last season. I don't think any Andretti drivers really set expectations massively high this season, but I think they're just hoping for a bit of an improvement. I think they're all confident, as we said, that 3 cars is going to help them towards this season. Let's go on to one of the friends of the podcast, from a bit of a podcast regular now, interviews wise, is Ray Robb, who's obviously moving to AJ Foyt coming into this year. Obviously, his announcement was fairly recently, so we got a lot of the details that we know already fairly recently. But
he was great vibes.
He was great vibes. He does bring great vibes as Stingray. He always has. So very, very interesting. Couple 20 minutes. You know, I do like people who bring good vibes. Malukas, Rob, must be a Dale Coyne thing.
Well, one thing I was going to say, I think I said earlier he was one to come in with a Starbucks. I don't know whether he might have come in with a Starbucks as well. But he came in with a winner's drink milk mug, I remember him saying. So maybe that is a hint that he feels really confident he'll win the 500 with the Penske Alliance.
Well, let's get on to that, because he was confident about it. He obviously mentioned he didn't want to be on last row qualifying again this year. And, you know, he's confident that they've got a good chance of the 500 this year. Obviously, Ferrucci was super strong last year, and he's pinpointed that's one of the main benefits of going to AJ Foyt Racing for next year, or this year.
This year. Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think ovals as a general thing for Rob were particularly strong. He crashed out at Texas. He crashed out at Indy, of course. So super speedways really weren't great for him. He wasn't really that much of a factor on the shorter ovals either. He was kind of one that would 4 laps down and what have you. But yeah, I think this is kind of almost a reset for him this season on ovals. I think in the teleconference last month, he described the Alliance as really, really valuable. And I think he genuinely believes that. I don't think he's just saying it.
Yeah. Some interesting stuff from Rob. Let's get back on overall. He had a massive new sponsor called Pray.com. We'd obviously heard a lot of his sponsorship had come from his work in Christianity. And a very interesting sponsor, a bit of a unique one.
Yeah, it's an app, I think, for prayer, and he said that it's quite significant to him because it aligns with his beliefs. So, you know, I think really credit to him. He's clearly put in, him and his team, a lot of work in the off season to find these partners to secure this second season for him. I think if you're talking about second seasons, that was one of the things I asked him. It's something I often speak about, is this feeling that rookies kind of deserve their rookie season and then a sophomore year for kind of the first year to adapt and the second year to really prove themselves. And Yeah, for Rob, he said that it will be quite important for him that he's not going into every weekend adapting, not going into every weekend just learning, and now he can kind of really focus on just performance rather than kind of his own just learning or development. And I also tried to press him into saying, you know, whether this was a multi-year deal. I think from what we gauged, it's not a multi-year deal. He said he thinks it can be, though, but, you know, it's important, obviously, to prove himself essentially this year, to prove that he is good enough, to prove that he belongs, and that is kind of a target for him, that if he has a good year, then, you know, that he could face this becoming a multi-year thing.
Yeah, Stingray gives quite a lot of important insights from quite a personal level. What he said so far is him and Voigt both seem really happy with how things have started there. He seems pretty confident. It feels like, from what I gauge, he feels like it's a bit of a step up from Coyne, and they seem happy with what he's bringing across as well, which is great news. And Rob did really highlight the importance of a second year. He was particularly vocal about it multiple times. And I think he said you need 10,000 hours to be great at something, is what he said. Yeah. So he's got a while to go, as he said, but he's well on his way.
He loves quoting stuff. He quoted the book The Outlier, and said it was the 10,000 hour rule, that you have to spend 10,000 hours to become great. And he said he's not quite there yet. He's on his way there, but, you know, he's back in IndyCar again, so he's got time to get there.
And let's talk about the highlight of his press conference. Someone asked him, with a teammate like Santino Ferrucci, will there be a pit road battle of hairstyles? Stingray's Rob's response: I think I need to find an electrical outlet with a fork.
Oh, brilliant. And I think one can only assume that is a reference to kind of seeing Santino's hair as being a little bit messy, because electrocuting yourself is not going to leave your hair in the finest state.
There we are. So, I mean, Stingray's had his own fashion sense. We've spoken. He had some interesting glasses on at the Indy 500 last season. So, Stingray and Santino, but they were both very enjoyable in their press conferences. They both gave very funny vibes. I think they both said they're really looking forward to working with each other. So we'll see how that dynamic works out.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, no, interesting pair. Maybe Santino will sport Stingray's glasses/goggles at some point.
Maybe Stingray will sport Santino's mullet.
Oh, that's an idea. I was going to say it was a bit like it was kind of a bit like Connor Daly, but I don't think Daly would be.
It's a bit more extreme than Daly, yeah.
Yeah,
almost.
And Daly, I don't think Daly would want to be compared to.
I was about to say, I think he'd be the last person who was copying his hairstyle. So, let's go on to the next interviewed person, driver, whatever we're going to call him, Carl Kirkwood. Obviously, we've spoken quite a lot about Andretti. He was very similar, happy to drop down to 3 cars. Feels like last season they kind of lacked consistency as a whole, which is what the 3 of them said, and it's something they're working towards the season.
Yeah, I think, to be fair, this was one of my favourites of the day. I think Kirkwood, you know, some drivers, understandably, given there's several hours they were being forced to kind of being there for this content, they filming their GIFs, filming whatever other stuff that will go out on NBC or IndyCar socials throughout the year. Some of them were giving quite short answers, but I thought Kirkwood was super insightful, to be quite honest. He was sporting a very white race suit. It was still AutoNation, but some different strand of AutoNation, some mobile something or other, I think.
Yeah, mobile service, I think it said.
Yeah, so that was something. I mean, obviously, we said this yesterday, a lot of the drivers were being asked about Milwaukee, about thermal, about the hybrid. I actually thought Kirkwood probably gave the best insight into thermal. Said it was very fun, but actually said it's a very physical track. So that's something to keep an eye out through the event between St. Pete and Long Beach, is it, I think?
Yes.
Yes. And he also was talking about the $1 million as well. He said, obviously, he's not under any illusion that the drivers will be getting the $1 million, but he said that's not really the incentive for drivers anyway. But yeah, I think looking at the 3 cars, his answers were very similar to Colton's, really. He said that, again, it's kind of the same number of people on the team, like wider scale, but more focused resources kind of to each car, less weight on each individual, kind of taking that pressure off them. But yeah, just a lot of notes on a lot of different stuff, really. He said that driver continuity, as we mentioned, is very comforting. He said that having Marcus Ericsson on board is just having a wealth of knowledge on board. He's bringing a lot of knowledge from Ganassi, which I think Kirkwood feels could really benefit Andretti, given Ganassi have really been the Imperious Honda team and the Imperious team in the series. Ovals, he earmarked as a place to improve. Kind of seems like a place to improve for a lot of teams. Ganassi, Penske, kind of seem the only team that are happy on all fronts on ovals. He said that he ended the 500 quickly, but he felt like still through last year. I think the improvement on ovals is a personal thing to him as well. I think he felt like he was still going into last season the oval races learning, and it wasn't until it kind of got to the latter stage of the 500 where he came very strong and almost looked like a contender for the win before the dramatic crash. That was kind of when he finally felt like he cracked it. He kind of learned what he needed to learn about how to get the car set up and everything. But that process kind of happened through May, and he now feels like maybe in 2024 he can just start off on that same front, so he's not constantly learning and striving for more, that he can start off at the top level from the outset. But yeah, the other note before we get onto kind of what he told us was just about having Brian Herta on his pit stand, that it was quite nice to have a former driver on his stand, because that was something he kind of never really experienced, which I thought was quite interesting.
Yeah, some huge takeaways from Carl there, and I think ovals was probably one of the standout points where he said he's not up to the standard he thinks he should be, and he was strong on the street courses in particular, but road courses he was pretty good too for the majority of the year, and he just feels a personal improvement in ovals is needed. I think one of the other points he said was about the hybrid. A lot of the drivers were saying, it might make a big difference mid-season. It could really affect the outcome of the championship. Carl was completely the opposite. I think he said, it'd be if you're leading the championship and the hybrid comes in and you do badly, it's easy to blame that and vice versa. But he kind of said, if you've got a quick car, you've got a quick car. It's not going to change the pecking order massively, which was quite interesting. So a lot of the other drivers didn't really thought it would make probably a bigger difference.
Yeah, there was one other that said that yesterday. I'm tempted to say it was possibly Will Power, maybe. Just scrolling through the notebook, I'm not entirely sure. There's so many pages of notes here. Definitely over 20, probably looking towards 30. Pretty much one per driver, to be honest. Yeah, I don't know who said it, but there was one driver yesterday who said it. But other than that, yeah, you're right. It's not kind of been something drivers have said. But yeah, just getting on to what we spoke to Kirkwood about. I asked him about the quite cool stat. I don't think he sees it as a particularly cool stat, but that he got 2 top 5s last season. They were both wins. So I kind of asked him just how, at the end of the day, he just will become more consistent. And he thanked me for the question. I reminded him of the fact that obviously he could have got a few more if it wasn't for a few incidents, and he acknowledged that. He kind of he did say that there were things out of their control that ultimately led to the fact they couldn't get more top 5s than they did. But he was another that was kind of just marveling at what Palou managed to achieve last year, saying that you kind of got to match that and be in the top 5 at least every other race, but often more than that, often ending up winning the races. Yeah, ultimately he says there's a lot of factors. A lot of it was just circumstance that maybe they weren't up there more often. You look at races like Detroit where Callum Ilott ended up pretty much on his rear wing and then surged through the field, got back into the top 10, which was a really good performance from Kirkwood. Yeah, he also acknowledges that there will be personal improvements that will come with experience, come with getting more knowledge of strategy. At the end of the day, it was still his sophomore season in IndyCar, and to get 2 wins was super impressive. It's even stuff like when to push, when not to push, when to fuel save, when not to fuel save. So there's a lot of stuff. He gave us a lot of detail. I think he said in terms of takeaways, which was kind of my follow-up question on his season, he said that he took away just how easy it was when he was at the front, that he was really comfortable. I think I remember him saying this after Long Beach, actually, but he feels really comfortable leading, and that's because of the experience he has of that in the junior categories, because he has been one of the best junior drivers kind of the ranks have produced in the US for many years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sort of the biggest thing that I've gathered from Carl was press conferences. he's got a lot of personal development to do. He's confident for the future. He's happy about Andretti's potential prospects with a 3-car team and continuity, but he's got a lot of personal improvement to make before he feels like he's ready to be at the top level.
Yeah, and one last note he made, actually, which I also thought was really interesting, is that he acknowledged that a big takeaway from last season, which was his first season with a sort of race-winning capable team, with a team that were contending for poles, was that everything before the actual race, so going through practice, going through the entire race weekend, is crucial, and it matters a lot more than everyone else really expects and thinks. A lot of people think, well, I just turned up for the race, that's all that matters, but it kind of shows why practice is so valuable and why drivers are having to make the most of every single minute on track.
Absolutely. Then we moved on to Felix Rosenqvist after a bit of a break. Obviously, he's heading to Meyer Shank into 2024, lining up alongside Tom Blomqvist, and didn't get too much out of Felix, but I think sort of the biggest gist that we got from him is him and Tom have got a lot of experience between themselves in various different categories. They seem to get on very well. We had an interesting nugget. I think it was that they both raced in 2009 Formula Renault Sweden or something like that, which was particularly interesting between the two of them.
Yeah, I think Felix noted that they've done a lot of similar stuff on the junior ladder, even if they've gone their own separate ways. They kind of may both be kind of... I think he said as a small team that there's a lot of disadvantages, but also he sees one advantage of the fact that him and Tom both raced in Formula E, which could give them a little bit of a knowledge of the hybrid. I think he feels he can draw from Tom's experience in IMSA, the team's experience in IMSA in terms of the hybrid. So yeah, I think it already seems that there's a pretty good dynamic there.
Yeah, he was pretty happy with Tom, and he was saying he is one of the best endurance drivers in the world. And as he said, that I think there's a bit for Felix to learn from Tom, and he's pretty happy with the dynamic. He said it was the cleanest workshop he's ever seen, which is quite interesting at Meyer Shank. And he seems happy about his start. He's happy with sort of the ownership so far. I don't think you mentioned too much about Helio, apart from in the 500, how much he is going to lean on him as advice and support, which would be interesting. Shank had been strong at the 500 because of Helio's influence in 2021. Obviously, last year wasn't quite the same heights, but he could have a very good chance. Yeah,
I mean, he wasn't quiet about his admiration for Helio, describing as one of the all-time best, which we all know, one of the all-time best in the 500. That is. Yeah, kind of more generally, he said the team were one of the most underrated in the field. He felt like Rinus Lundgaard proved that with his performances when he stepped in last season. He feels, or at least he wants them to kind of get back into top 10 contention. I think he felt that was possibly realistic. He believes they are quite strong on street courses, might be a bit tougher on ovals, and simply from his own point of view, just wants to be more consistent. Feels there have been too many DNFs. He wants to finish more races. He knows that maybe there have been too many crashes on his side, but also reliability issues. There was the Ericsson collision, obviously, last year was another one. I think we kind of earmarked... Yes, yep, true, actually, true. Laguna as well, of course. We kind of earmarked that he maybe has a few too many crashes on ovals.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's one thing. But yeah, I think, again, looking back at the dynamic, he kind of feels like he may be less in the shadows than he has been at McLaren and Ganassi, for instance. It's kind of a role as a team leader with Tom as a rookie, as much as he feels he can also maybe draw and learn some stuff from Tom.
Yeah. I didn't get too much out of Felix, but some interesting takeaways from it.
Yeah, and he feels he can call the shots. That's the last thing I've noted down, that he kind of feels the first time since he was in Formula E, he feels like he can kind of be in control and call the shots a bit. He's not been on track with the team yet, so... That's something, and that's actually quite notable. That's something we kind of knew that it was the big teams doing the hybrid testing. But Grosjean said yesterday, didn't he, that he'd get a day and a half, at Homestead, and that'd be the first time in the car with Juncos. I've got another noted down somewhere. I think it was Rob actually saying he'd not been on track at all.
Yes.
But actually, yeah, that was quite interesting with Rob. Actually, one last note on him going back there. He said that he hadn't often been to the shop, which is a new thing that you figured out what the shop was. You thought it was an actual shop?
Well, yeah, because obviously we use factory or workshop, whatever.
Yeah.
There was just
They seem to just take the shop
common
off the end of
language.
workshop. Yeah, that was interesting actually from Rob. He said that he was barely really at the shop with Coyne, and that now with Foyt already, he's kind of been more involved, whether just doing stuff like pit stop practice. They're in Indy, so it's close to home for him. So yeah, some of the smaller teams yet to get on track, and that's kind of going to be the next hurdle and step for them.
Yeah. Let's move on to Kyffin Simpson, who was running the number 4 for the season, which was announced today. Sort of a legendary CGR number run by likes of Alex Zanardi, Juan Pablo Montoya, and a couple of others. Simpson, obviously, first time doing this, doesn't really have much experience in the field, but there was a couple of things to take from Simpson. I think a lot of it was going to be learning from the likes of Alex Palou and Scott Dixon, as well as Dario Franchitti. Seems to be all quite influential in what he's going to be doing. Sorry, I think maybe the most interesting thing about Kyffin Simpson's press conference was how he got into motorsport. Revealed he was really good friends with F2 driver Zane Maloney, who kind of inspired him to join IndyCar and become a racing driver. I think he said his first ever race was the 2018 Indy 500, which is only 5 years ago. That's the first race he ever watched in IndyCar. So that's how he got into the sport, and he's obviously going to be lining up for Ganassi this season.
Yeah, that was fascinating. I mean, it's the first time I've really heard from Kyffin, maybe aside from the odd Indy Next, Indy Lights thing. He's new to this sort of media thing. I think it really struck how young he is. He's pretty much the same age as us, which is, incredible. I think he's ever so slightly older than me, slightly younger than you. So it's probably nerve-wracking for him. He's probably not done that much media stuff, but it was good to just get to know a little bit about him. He didn't know really the history of the number 4 car particularly. He said that's something he's got to learn more of, and appreciate the honesty, to be fair. I think it's kind of just digging into he's coming into IndyCar. There's a few thoughts that it may be a little premature. Obviously he's got a lot of backing behind him, people saying he could benefit from another year in Indy Next, but he knows there's going to be learning on the job. But he says particularly the team are confident that he's going to be able to make the jump. He believes he's got the teammates and engineers to help him. Obviously, again, the advisory role of Dario Franchitti. He's got Scott Dixon, got Alex Palou. So yeah, there were a few interesting things kind of to take from it. I think he said after Laguna, it was decided that this would happen. I think was that an answer to me?
Yes.
Did I ask
yes.
that? God, the day's been so long, I can't even remember what I asked. But yeah, he said that it was decided this would happen after Laguna. That I don't think this was always the plan. I don't know whether it was.
Didn't seem like it. No.
No, I think it. Leaving it until after Laguna suggests it wasn't something that was decided particularly early on. Yeah, I also tried to, dig into, are you focusing on results, or is it more simply about developing, adapting, learning in this kind of extra 5th entry for Ganassi? And on that, I think, well, he pretty much just agreed with what I said, and it does seem like results will be secondary for him. I can't remember the exact quote. I don't know if you've got it up there, but he wasn't giving too much away. But I think it's clear that he's not got massively high expectations.
Yeah, well, sort of, he wants to get the best of he can. He said, if the car's good enough for 5th, I want to get 5th. If the car's good enough for 10th, I want to get 10th. So I think sort of the consensus is it's a learning year for Simpson, and see what he could do this year. It's a chance to prove himself in the series. So best of luck to him as a rookie. He's got a lot to learn in the year ahead, but he's obviously got a great team around him, which is going to be quite significant. Yeah,
and I think people are possibly underrating his skill set. He's young, he's inexperienced. Maybe this is premature. We'll find out. But he won, his team won in the European Le Mans series last year. So he's got experience of competing at the front of grids. He's got experience of being successful. I think he has kind of through the road to Indy ladder been younger than a lot of the people he's been competing against, which, age can just be a number sometimes, but it can also be, it can impact things. Yeah, he says that from European Le Mans series, he's got stuff like pit stop experience to draw on, which, you know, it's something. They don't get that purely from Indy Next because they don't have pit stops. But yeah, I'm quite keen to see it work out for him because there's clearly a lot of pressure on him. I think, you know, he said it was hard to think about the 500. It's a bit overwhelming. It's crazy that he's here with Ganassi. He's not. I don't think he's tested yet. He said there will be some before St. Pete. Not much sim time or anything. So yeah, I'd like it to work out for him. There's obviously a lot of backing and financials and stuff, but you know, I kind of wish him the best because there's going to be pressure on him. There's going to be eyes saying, well, he's only here because of this, that, and the other. So I'd like him to prove some people wrong.
Talking of proving people wrong, RC Enerson was one who proved many people wrong last year by making the field. And we sort of had an impromptu announcement from RC Enerson, kind of came on the stage to get confirmation he's going to be back next year in the Indy 500. We'll obviously get onto it a bit later, but it looks like bumping will be returning with the course of this announcement. And Enerson, I don't think many people really know about RC Enerson, but he was great. Gave a lot of insights, very honest about his prospects and what he learned last year. And, you know, they're really happy with how last year went. He said they were the odds-on favourite to get bumped by everyone, and they made the field pretty comfortably in his eyes. And he's obviously going to be back there next year for another attempt at it.
Yeah, but he was a great speaker. I mean, we spoke about Ray Robb being good vibes. I think Enerson kind of fit that category as well. He was a good speaker and kind of came across really well as a really great guy as well. I mean, kind of on the 500, he spoke about the sole focus last year being making the field. They didn't do any traffic running until afterwards, so that was a challenge for them kind of going into the race. He said he was having to ask drivers if what he felt was right, what he felt wasn't right. So, you know, he was clearly, you know, he maybe felt a little bit out of his depth at times. I don't know whether that's fair to say, but I think he definitely feels heading into this year, he's got more experience. He now knows what he's doing. They're going to make the April test, which they didn't last year, which was, you know, they missed out on a bit of valuable running there. So, yeah, I mean, in terms of looking beyond that, he's not really someone people know much about. He kind of, you know, he does the 500 and then you don't really see him anywhere else, but he does some driver coaching when not in the car. I think it was mentioned in the Tampa area. I think he might be from that sort of area. I don't know if I'm right in saying that.
He's doing it in Tampa. That's what I can tell you.
Is he from that?
Let's have a look. RCE.
I think he went to school in that sort of area. I read.
He was born in Florida, so yeah, must be from around.
Yeah.
There,
so I mean, he said that some of the kids that he coaches don't even know he did the Indy 500. So he's clearly quite a down to earth, quite a modest guy. I asked him if he kind of had explored full-time IndyCar ventures. He said kind of it's a goal for everyone, but that's his goal looking for 2025. There's obviously a lot of factors that go into that in terms of sponsorship and getting all of that together. But yeah, he said it depends whether he'd do any more races. I think if Abel do make the step up, as some reports, I think Marshall Pruitt was one who reported that they may be looking for a full-time IndyCar venture in 25. Possibly it would be with Jacob Abel. That would probably make the most sense. But RC Enerson is clearly open to any possible opportunities, it looks like. But yeah, he's kind of just along there for the ride. He's loving it. He said he's never been in the Dallara simulator, never been in the Chevrolet simulator. But still, last year was strong, qualified 28th. He got a bit of race running under his belt for a car issue. I think he said it is still quite valuable that he did get that race running under his belt heading into this year if he is to make the field. It looks like it'll be a competitive field this year. Yeah, I think this will be his 7th IndyCar race, 2nd Indy 500 if he gets into the field. Yeah,
I think one of the most interesting things he said was about learning to race in the pack because it's not something he'd done before. And I think it was to you he said that. He was asking the other drivers, what do I do? How do I race in a pack? And I think they said to him, no, you're doing the right thing. It's just difficult to pass. So
yeah, that's one of my favourite quotes from the day, really, actually. I think that was really quite a cool thing just to hear. It's quite an honest thing as well, you know. Not saying, oh, I'll figure this out myself. You know what? Yeah, I'll go and draw on other drivers. I might not have a teammate, but I'll go and ask. And yeah, good on him.
That's really good. And I think Enerson came across really well. And, you know, I think we all love a little small project defeating the odds like Carl Kaiser did knocking out Fernando Alonso just a few years ago. So great to see Enerson back for the Indy 500. As we said, looks like bumping is going to come back. I think we worked it out. So we have 27 full-time entries. We've got Rasmussen, Larson and Cashinevers confirmed. And then we've got Enison now confirmed. Andretti is obviously pretty likely. And then we've got the 2 DNRs coming in. That's 34. We're also looking at a potential Foyt car, so we could be up to 35 entries.
Yeah, I mean, I think it feels a bit less harsh when you've got more than one driver being bumped. Like last year, just being Rahal. I mean, does it soften the blow a little bit if you're one of 2 or one of even maybe 3, which would be great if there were 3 cars got bumped and you've all of a sudden got a bump day with 7 cars competing or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be absolutely fantastic. And obviously, we'll look more into that on our next edition of the podcast. But huge news coming. I think we didn't really know much about the Enison entry. We were like a bit hopeful, but great news to see the bumpings back. And hopefully, if it's anything like last year, in for an absolute treat. And then to round off both days was Linus Lundgaard. And I think Linus, maybe out of the 2 days, was one of the most interesting ones. Again, he was very, very honest, just like RC Enison. He gave some really interesting answers. Again, like a lot of the Ganassi guys today, I was learning from Scott, learning from Dario, learning from Alex, and obviously the questions about expanding to a 5-car team. He went to Sweden in the off season, which he found really relaxing. He really liked it, and he kind of mentioned how IndyCar's growing because of Rosenqvist and Ericsson. Obviously, winning the 500 really helped that. Targets wise, again, he was one who was fairly neutral about his targets. Must just be a Ganassi thing, really. But he was like, there isn't an amount of races I don't want to win. I just want to maximize what I can do. And obviously, Rookie of the Year was one which he obviously was thinking about. I think he'd probably be our bet for the Rookie of the Year, from what he showed. But yeah, Linus was super interesting, super honest. We'll get onto what we asked him in a bit. But he was pretty confident. And, again, another driver gave really great vibes to end off the last few sessions.
Well, he was 8 minutes early, and he was another one that was a sponge.
Yes.
He's another that, well, my takeaway that drivers are sponges, but yeah, no, I think he was another, and it's great to see that these young drivers are open to learn. There's no ego about them. They're all very, they know that they've got to draw from the experiences of their teammates. And obviously, again, it's looking at Ganassi like we've looked at with Simpson, like with Armstrong a little bit. They've got 2 of the series, probably the two best drivers in the series to kind of learn from. So it's good to see that they are willing to tap into that. But yeah, I think we mentioned it briefly earlier with Rasmussen. Lundqvist is another one that is now just able to rest easy rather than spending the off season incessantly looking for sponsors. And he said that it's abnormal at this time of year. He's usually, what we'd say is a bit of a grafter, but he can actually rest now, and he knows what he's doing for the year, and he's got a secure future rather than having absolutely no idea what he's doing.
Yeah, and that was a lot of what we asked Linus about what about his future and when he found out about it. And he gave us some really good answers. So first we kind of asked him about being on the sidelines. Was it frustrating seeing your peers race? But we asked him, was he confident that opportunity would come? And he said, he honestly said no. He didn't think it would happen. He had doubts, but he kind of said he kept on pushing. He wasn't ready to give up. He made himself aware. He made the bosses know that he was there. He made team principals known he was there, and he'd go to every race to make sure that he was still around. And credit to Lundqvist, it must have been quite easy to lose that motivation, because what more could he have done? He really impressed in Indy Lights, and that opportunity didn't come, but he carried on pursuing it.
Yeah, he said he wants to hassle people, he wants to meet people, he wants to be on people's minds, and that persistence has ultimately paid off. And he now says it's like a dream. He said he was checking his Instagram every morning when he woke up to make sure the posts were still there. He was still a Ganassi driver. But yeah, I think he also told you that this moved very quickly, kind of after Nashville.
Yeah.
The first race kind of sold people, what he could produce. He said it was essential for his future that he did those 3 races. But it was particularly the first one in Nashville that changed everything. Chip called sometime after that, he said. And yeah, it's really, really great to see someone that clearly deserves the opportunity, get the opportunity with probably the series' best performing team in recent years. Yeah,
and obviously he took the first 3 races he had with both hands. We sort of said, is it going to give you a head start into next year? And he said, driving on an oval or road course and a street course was really vital for him. It's really going to help him in his preparation. He feels a bit more confident just knowing how the weekend works, really. And I think maybe the biggest thing is, as I asked him, is that if it wasn't for those 3 races, do you think, did that help you getting full-time rides? And he said, honestly, I don't think I'd be here without those 3 races, which is really interesting. It just shows in this series that you just need to grasp the opportunity you've got, and that's all you can do. And Lundgaard did fantastically, and it was a bit frustrating he didn't get to see the season, but he's such a great addition to the grid. I'm so glad he's got an opportunity, not only an opportunity to really unleash himself at the very top.
And he's super motivated and thinks he can do that as well. He said he expects to compete for wins, compete for podiums, which, in your rookie year, you could say, whoa, just, calm it down a little bit. But he believes it, and I believe him.
Yeah, and that was IndyCar Content Day 2024. I mean, really, really fantastic couple of days. I think. What are you taking away from the previous 2 days?
I mean, there's so much, isn't it? Bush Bros died, and now Bush Bros is alive again. Apparently,
yes.
We've got this our statement saying it's not the end. So that's something. But yeah, I think there was so much. Obviously, we've touched on all of the stuff today. I think yesterday, obviously, I think Helio's comments about Gilles were really nice, and Newgarden's quotes stuck out to me about kind of getting back to loving this. And yeah, I mean, I'd have to remind myself, there's been a lot of people talking for a lot of time. But yeah, I think obviously Pato's comments, I think I really appreciated all the drivers who really went in depth to the questions. Kirkwood, Lundqvist, of course, were 2 particular ones I thought were excellent. Just the little fun bits. Will Power complaining about his sandwiches, and David Malukas making his David Malukas-like comments, just bundles of energy and fun. It's been great. I mean, what are your highlights? What do you take away?
Well, I take away some Spanish lessons, I think, from the last 2 days is going to be the most important.
How could I forget?
I think that's going to be one of the moments of the content days. But yeah, lots of Starbucks, lots of race suits. I think it's the small things which really get us engaged as fans. But overall, it's been a really great couple of days getting all these insights from drivers. And, I think looking at a series standpoint, is the confidence that this series is going to grow. And most of the drivers are confident about the series future. The hybrid they think is a great addition, and the series is going in the right direction, and they're confident of that. They feel this is sort of the best IndyCar's been in the last couple of years, and hopefully we're in for a great season.
Yeah, I think, to be fair, that's reminded me of the comments from Ray Hall, which stood out to me about saying that we're going to find out some big stuff really soon. I think Ericsson, obviously, we said today, kind of repeated that sentiment a little bit. So yeah, that's something that's really encouraging as well. This whole Penske Entertainment dinner might be the most important thing that's come out of this, actually, to be fair. I found out a few details about this. So yeah, that's big.
Yeah. So great couple of days for us. Obviously, we got a lot of insights of drivers, and hopefully we'll have a few more on the podcast soon. Obviously, I really appreciate the guys at IMS Day First and the rest of the IndyCar team in organising this. Really appreciated from all of you and the opportunity to invite us and get this little insight to share to you guys, which hopefully you've enjoyed as well. A little sneak preview into this season.
Yeah, I'll just echo that as well. And not sure they'll be listening to this, but if they are and they've got all the way through, we really appreciate the opportunities that have been given to us to speak to some really high-profile names and really kind of get ourselves out there and gain some really good content for you guys to listen to as well.
Absolutely. So talking of content, we'll be back on Tuesday and normal time slots for a new episode of Off-Season, I'd imagine. We've got lots to talk about in the last few weeks, so we'll be back. We'll be doing some fun stuff as well, I think, we'll imagine.
Yeah, maybe revisit our driver market.
Yeah, I think we realised in the best of 2023 we were scrambling to find a lot of our good predictions, so that kind of sums it out. So we'll look back at some of them. We'll have a bit of fun as you always do, the off-seasoning segments, find some little bit of nuggets, and we'll look at that next week. So thanks to all the IMS team for arranging. We really hope you've enjoyed these last 2 days. We certainly have. So thanks very much for watching. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.